Shalom, this is Rob Van Hoff from Heart of Messiah doing another glimpse at an ancient manuscript from the Dead Sea Scrolls for this week's Torah portion, which is Parashat Vayikra, so the beginning of the book Sefer Vayikra, which is the book of Leviticus. And we're looking at a fragment here from the Qumran find from Cave 4. And Cave 4 is part of the compound. It's not a hard to get to cave. Rather, it seems to have been a live storage place, Cave 4, active storage for the Qumran study community. And this is called 4Q24. It's from the Hasmonean era. So it is possible that this fragment in the book the scroll that it was part of was copied outside of Qumran and brought to Qumran. So this is probably a 2nd century BC glimpse. Of course, they're already using the block script, which comes really from the Aramaic script for Hebrew text here, and it probably predates the establishment of the Qumran community in terms of an Essene library, scholarship library. So in any event, this is a fragment you can see. I'll show you, these are from the deadseascrolls.org website. This is the color photograph, and you can see how the leather, right, with the ink on there, you can see it's kind of hard to read. Some of it is legible, but you can see the value when you contrast this with the other picture that uses the special infrared photography. You see how the ink really pops, and you can see it a lot better. It's pretty cool. And we'll be comparing that with, as we have many times, with Washington Pentateuch, which is a 10th century Masoretic product probably from Tiberias, Israel. And as you can see, well, here's the first page of Vayikra from that, the Washington Pentateuch, Vayikra El Moshe, and he called to Moshe. And that is the beginning of the book of Leviticus. Well, it's really, the first fragment that we have really is going to be from the second page here. But I wanted you to see the intro to Leviticus starts up here in the upper right-hand corner. And it starts up, if you remember, Leviticus opens up with the burnt offering, what's we call the Olah, which is basically the pinnacle of all the public sacrificial worship is the Olah. And it talks about animals from the herd first, and then you see there's an indentation over here in the third column to the left. It says V'im mi hatzon korbano, meaning and if from the flock. So the first two columns here are for the procedure for an animal that's of the herd, but if it's of the flock, that's this little indent here. Then, so this is still chapter 1, and we flip the page, and it says Ve'imin ha'of olah korbano, and if from the birds. So an olah could be from the birds even, and they're all acceptable worship, even though economically, something from the herd, something from the flock, or a bird would be of different values in earthly economy. But in God's acceptance of a burnt offering, it says they are all reach nichoach la'Adonai, a soothing aroma unto the Lord, and that means He accepts the worship. But due to the nature of the fragment that we're looking at with the Dead Sea Scrolls, let me go back there. You see, we don't have all these wonderful columns. We see the break And so you'll see all this space here. So this is the end of the word reach nikoach la'Adonai, a pleasing aroma unto the Lord, and then a space. And then we see the word, something's broken off, and it says ha'of olah, from the birds. Well, that corresponds to this same break we see here. So we see reach nikoach la'Adonai, soothing aroma unto the Lord, and then we see this space, and then it says ve'im min ha'of olah korbano, and if from the of is birds, but there's this, the scribes leave this space here to distinguish that. And so here we're looking probably maybe 11 to 1200 years earlier. We're seeing a scribal tradition that does the same thing. It leaves this space here, reach nikoach, pleasing unto the Lord, a space, and then presumably the new line begins over to the right and says, and if from the of, the birds, his burnt offering, and then gives the prescription for that. And what we're doing here, I'm going to transition to my writing pad here. So this is a zoom of that same fragment, what we're calling it's called 4Q24. And this is Leviticus, the section we're looking at here today, Leviticus chapter 1, and it's roughly 14 through 17 that we're going to be looking at. So let's get started here. So as I said, we're finishing, I guess it's the equivalent of verse 13 here, where it's talking about the end of this line up here, which is talking about the procedure if it's from the tzon being flock. And what we see here, and I'll just write it, is yod, resh, chet, and then the tzadi, b'mayim. So your chatz b'mayim is he will wash in water. And so here we have a Hasmonean era mem sophit, a real nice mem sophit that's different from that mem. So what we remember is that in this time frame, from the 2nd century BC into the 1st century BC, the scribal tradition was not uniform in terms of final letters. Remember, because we're still seeing some texts that are being copied in Paleo Hebrew. We're seeing texts that have the Aramaic script or the block script, like we see here, which I call the Aramaic/block script, where the Tetragrammaton is preserved in Paleo Hebrew. We've seen examples of that. And then we've seen all block script text where there are no differentiation between sophit letters and regular letters. So all these are evidence of different scribal conventions that are brought together in the Qumran library, which is basically the library of the Essenes. Now, it was kind of like a central storehouse for the Essene library, and they brought to their library books books meaning scrolls, from all different places and different scribal conventions. So this is just an example here, just to point out that on our word in the water, he will wash in water. Here's an opportunity to see two mems together. So again, we see bet, mem, yod, mem. And we see a mem sophit. And it's not just a mem sophit, but it's a lot bigger, isn't it? That final mem there. It's definitely a different form. And the very end there of that passage we can look at is reach nikoach la'Adonai. And the spelling here would be nun, yod, chet, vav, chet. So the chet here looks almost like an H. You see how they did it? It's like two vertical lines with the horizontal line. That's what the chet looks like in this manuscript. That's the before that we'd have, oops, gotta undo what I just did there. We'd see reach nekoach la'Adonai. So look at this lovely lamed here. It goes way up like that. Here's a yod, hey, vav, hey. So one differentiation here is that the hey, remember the way we learn a block hey today is something like that. It's like a resh with a little leg, detached leg. And then we make a chet, we start with the same stroke, kind of like a resh, but it goes all the way up. So that's kind of the standard way you differentiate a chet from a hey, the way we learn simple block script today. But remember, this is 2nd century BC. We have the chet is like two lines like this, with it's like a little bar going across the top, and a hey kind of starts the same way, but does that instead. So this would be a chet, and this would be a hey. So scholars who study the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's so many different facets. There's what we're looking at here is paleography. So paleography, that is the study of how letters were written, how the scripts were changed. And different scribes, of course, would have slightly different styles. So there's styles within a same script, and then there's completely different scripts. But this is that end of the section from Leviticus 1 about the tzon, if it's from the flock. And it says, it's a reach nekoach la'Adonai, unto the Lord. And of course, in block script, we would say lamed, lamed yod hey vav hey, like that, unto the Lord. Now for an offering, just a side note, for an offering to be acceptable to Adonai, what does that mean? For it to be acceptable to him means that the heart of the worshiper must be true. Yeshua said, and remember what he told the woman, the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, the Father seeks those that will worship him in spirit and truth. So for your offering to be a reach nekoach, a pleasing aroma unto the Lord, that means you don't also have an obligation of a sin offering. For example, in Leviticus, as you continue to learn about the sin offering, a sinner has an obligation to do a sin offering. If I owe a sin offering because of a transgression, I can't just go in and offer a burnt offering. That would be unacceptable unto Adonai. But even a burnt offering, even if someone were physically able to get in and offer a burnt offering, but has a heart full of sin, it's not going to be a reach nekoach. We learned that from Isaiah chapter 1, for example, where, of course, they had priests and Levites serving in the temple, in Solomon's temple. They knew how to slaughter animals. They all spoke Hebrew. But what does Isaiah say? It says that, your offerings are a stench to me. Why is that? I'm paraphrasing there, but he says your hands are stained with blood. It means their behavior was such that they owed something different than a burnt offering. They needed repentance, so their burnt offerings would be in vain. So the presumption of Leviticus 1 concerning the burnt offerings, for it to be a reach nekoach, the presumption is that the offerer is coming to Adonai in spirit and in truth. So it's instructions for the priests in the procedures for this pinnacle of worship in the Levitical system. And this is what is leveraged, this acceptable worship of Adonai is leveraged by Yeshua as the commandment to love God with all our heart, all our soul, all our strength, and to love one another, to love my neighbor as myself, that these are the weightiest commandments of the Torah, and that it's more than even all whole burnt offerings. So for that to have significance means that the whole burnt offerings were in fact acceptable worship from those who come to Adonai in spirit and truth. Okay, so we're just going to zoom a little bit here now and look at starting with verse 14, where it says, if from the flock, or sorry, not from the flock, we just finished it, from ha'of. And I'll try and see if I can get the Washington Pentateuch here behind us. Ve'im min ha'of olah. And then I can maybe move this over. We can see these together. Yeah, so ve'im min ha'of olah korbano la'Adonai. So we're just going to compare what we see there and this line here. So of course, we're missing the beginning, which we're going to presume, we're going to reconstruct by looking at the Masoretic tradition. We have the first word, and if, ve'im, so that's going to be vav, aleph, and then a mem sofit. Now the vowel points we see here is really easy. It's a shavah under the vav, and then a hirik under the aleph, ve'im, and if. And then it says min ha'of. So we're going to presume here again, drawing on our Masoretic tradition, that we have a nun. Here's a good nun sofit. So while we don't see the whole thing here, we can see the top of this stroke here. It's the same stroke here. Min. So this is, oops, I didn't mean to erase that one. Yeah, I had it better. Min. I'm kind of mimicking their nun, sofit. And then hey, ayin. The ayin looks a lot like the ayin that we know today. Vav, and then a pei sofit. Look at that. So far we've seen three nice sofit letters. We've seen the mem sofit right here. We've seen the nun sofit here, and the pei sofit here. Min ha'of olah. Now the Masoretic vowel points is kind of funny. You could actually, with my scribble here, can write the Masoretic vowel points on here, even though, of course, they did not exist back at this time. Korbano. So here's a kuf, resh, bet, nun, not nun sofit. So now, just as we see, well, here we go. Here's the word hakohen. I'm going to look ahead to this next line. This is hakohen right here. Ha. The priest. The priest. But this nun sofit is what I want to contrast with the nun that we see in korbanot. So here's a nun sofit. Here's a non-final nun. So basically the convention they have here, we can again compare the middle nun, right? The nun from the middle, and then the final nun looked like that. It's hard writing on this glass because it's kind of slippery. Yeah. It's kind of like that. It's this stroke. I guess I could trace it. You could see it. Could write it a bunch of times. That's our final nun. So again, 2nd century BC, this manuscript demonstrates what it's very, very early. It might be one of our earliest extant witnesses, physical witness that comes from an archaeological find that demonstrates to us the implementation of this emerging scribal convention. An emerging scribal convention, which is what we learn today. Every person who learns Hebrew today, you have to learn the 5 final letters. It's just standard Hebrew. But we have to realize that 2nd century BC, we didn't have that. If you were learning scribal art in 2nd century BC, you might learn in a school that just taught Paleo Hebrew, for example, and there's no differentiation, right? Mem a mem is just a mem, right? A nun is just a nun, etc. There's no differentiation for a final form. While here in 4Q24, we see in this fragment of the Torah from Leviticus, we see this final form of the 5 letters. Now, I don't know if we have on this one, if we have examples. Well, I can tell you we do have most, because we've got the pei sofit here of ha'of, and then we have this word from its wings, knafav, and it's bet, kaf, nun, and look at the pei. I'm going to zoom in on that one, because this is also good to see contrasting letters that look an awful lot alike. I'm going to erase that. We'll do that again. This is by its wings, okay? By its wings, which I don't remember what verse that is. I don't have that in front of me. It's in the range here. But the word for wing is kanaf, right? You know that. Kaf, nun, pei sofit. So here we have a bet. A kaf and a bet look an awful lot alike. But what differentiates the bet from the kaf is this little guy right here. The bet goes like that, and the kaf goes like that. Real close, aren't they? Pretty cool. Then we have a nun, a middle nun. Remember, just one more time, go over to here to the Cohen, to the priest, and we see this nun, final nun. Oops. And then we have our pei sofit, or pei like this. That's a middle pei. And we contrast that with the pei we saw with of right here. I'll erase it and zoom in so you can see it better. Isn't that nice? You see that? It's like one big, it looks an awful lot like what we see today. It's like a giant candy cane for a pei sofit. But here, you can see in the middle form, it doesn't even have the nice curved top, does it? It's like boom, 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 boom. 4 lines. And then, so far then, we can say in this manuscript, we've discerned a mem, right? A mem from a mem sophite, a nun from a nun sophite, and we've seen a pei from a pei sophite. Pretty neat. And we have rachatz here. This is the word wash, do a wash. And we see what looks like a pei sophite, or a tzadi sophite, but sadly you can see it's a little bit damaged. But I would say it looks like something like that. You see that? I don't know the order of the strokes. Ada Yardeni, that's a book, if you're interested in this sort of thing, a book for you to get is Ada Yardeni. I'll write it on here. And it's the book of Hebrew script. Beautiful book. Published by Carta in Jerusalem. And it's kind of spendy, but it's worth it. It's a beautiful, it makes a great coffee table book too. Beautifully made book, beautiful images. But she was an amazing artist, calligrapher of Hebrew, and also a Dead Sea Scroll scholar. So, and then we'll see the end here. This is all about the bird. Here's another letter we'll be able to recognize. Oh, there we go. We do have the letter tzadi. There we go. So now we can add, so we can contrast this letter here. See it way down there? All the way to this letter here. So now we have a tzadi and then a final tzadi. So just on this fragment, just on this one fragment of 4Q24, we have data for these forms, a mem, a nun, a pei, and a tzadi, both middle and final forms. And that represents some sort, and I suggest it's from, this reflects someone, a scribe that was learned from the temple. Because I believe that the final forms got their official sanction or institutional backing as a standard, as a unifying scribal convention from temple authorities. Now, that doesn't mean every scribe that was out there copying using those, using this convention necessarily was copying an accurate text. I mean, we'll see here places where this fragment differs from what we know from the later Masoretic tradition. Here's this last little bit here, because I've gone a little bit longer than I planned to today, which is okay. But again, we have reach nekoach right here at the end. Reach nekoach. And so it's resh. Oops, get my pen on here. Resh, yod, chet, nun. Here's, see how that's not a nun sophite? That's a yod, chet, vav, chet. And then we have le, yod, and this is going to be la Adonai again. Sorry, I realized I was writing. You guys couldn't see it. Reach nekoach la Adonai. So in square script today, we would just write resh, yod, chet, nun, yod, chet, vav, chet, and then we would put lamed, yod, hey, vav, hey, like that. But let's contrast this, now I need to just go here and move this over just a little bit. And then bring that back so we can look at these together. Notice the Hebrew, it says reach, so it's got a, what we call a tzere, and then a furtive patach, reach, that's the aroma. Nichoach, it's noon with a hirik, so we'd put a hirik here, and then a cholam, and then another furtive patach, nichoach. That's the pleasing word translated pleasing. A reach nichoach is a pleasing aroma, l'Adonai, unto the Lord. Well, what we notice is that in the Masoretic tradition, reach is resh yod chet, just like we have here, resh yod chet. But look at the Masoretic nichoach. It's just nun, yod, chet, chet, with the same vowel points, nichoach. So once again, and we've seen this many, many times, that the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments often use the certain vowel letters, or certain letters, consonants, as vowels, a yod, a vav, or a he. And here we see the vav used as an o sound, nichoach. So there's no difference in meaning between the Masoretic nichoach and the nichoach we see here in this fragment of Leviticus 4Q24, but we see the number of total consonants is going to be different. That's not the only difference. There's another difference here leading up to this, reach nichoach, is this, it says, oh, oops, let me go, this is my last point here, olah, and then it says he, olahi, there's a nice aleph for us to see, olahi. Well, look at what the Masoretic text has up above here. It says olahu, olahu. So the Masoretic text has olah, same thing, with the vowel points, of course, olah, but it has the word hu, like that, whereas the Dead Sea Scroll fragment here has he. They're both pronouns. The Dead Sea Scrolls using the feminine he, meaning she or it, whereas the Masoretic tradition preserves hu, it. They both mean hu. But that's not the only difference. There's another word, ishe. Ishe. It is an offering of fire, is an ishe. Ishe. Well, the word ishe is missing altogether in this fragment from Qumran. What we see in the Masoretic tradition is the need for another word here, ishe. So there's a word missing in this fragment from Dead Sea Scrolls. So, and that's common. I mean, it's a common error that you would find such a thing, that you would have missing words. This is why scribal schools, this is why scribes needed teachers and overseers, someone who would go back and check. And we do know that in some of the scroll fragments that we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls do have corrections. You'll see, there's times, for example, where you'll see the Tetragrammaton. Now, not in this manuscript, but you'll see that. And then they will write over the top of it, Adonai. And so the idea is that another hand has come and corrected the text according to how they felt it should be corrected. Anyway, so this, we talked about a lot of different things here, but some takeaways from this 4Q24 from the Hasmonean era are the evidence of that emerging scribal convention. So this, if you ever wondered where did these 5 final forms come from, they come from this time frame. They come from roughly the 2nd century BC into the 1st century. It's really in the Herodian period where it becomes standard. And from there on out, it's pretty much always, you're always going to see it. These 5 final forms. The only place you don't is in coinage, subsequent coinage, where the Paleo-Hebrew, the Old Hebrew script is used for the sake of the imperial kind of ideology on the coins. But so we see that here. We see some variance in spelling. But we do notice too is this space. The space between the end of the description for the priests of the burnt offerings from the flock, and then we have all this space here before we start with the birds right here. And if you remember, looking back, we see the same thing in the Masoretic tradition, which is 11 to 1200 years newer. We see Reach Nechoach LaAdonai, a pleasing aroma unto the Lord, and then that space, and then a new line starting that next instruction for the oath. So visually, you could imagine, that line helps you to find that section. So I hope this is enjoyable for you all, and I enjoy doing this. So far, we started at the end of Genesis. We've done every Torah portion through Exodus, and now we're beginning the book of Vayikra. And this is Rob Vanna from Heart of Messiah. Hope you have enjoyed this, and send me an email if you have any questions, or you can always post in the comments. Thanks so much.